recording, as everybody knows. We do all our meetings. And I think I will start by giving my required speech. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of January 8th, 2021, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee to meet in person. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we will post the meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance. We'll provide a recording of this meeting linked on our website, and we will take all votes by roll call. And knowing that we're doing it by roll call and for the sake of time, we will instead simultaneously do the roll call and the approval of the minutes. So with that in mind, does anybody have any additions or corrections to the minutes of the last meeting? If not, I will accept a motion to accept the meeting. Somebody care to make one?
So moved.
Great. Is there a second?
Second, Paul Haas.
Thank you. All right, then we will proceed to an approval by roll call. So Dominic, is that going to be you?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dominic Argamedo, one of the liaisons for the committee, as the chair has mentioned, will be looking for a present for attendance and a yes or no on the minutes. Also, due to absences, if you're sitting in for someone, please let me know and feel free to speak up when we get to that person's name. Also, if I mispronounce your name, please feel free to correct me. I would very much appreciate it. Thank you. So I'll now begin with the roll and the call. Matthew Asselmeyer. Okay. Drew Assam. Adam Ballard.
I am here and I vote yes on the minutes.
Okay. Alan Banks. Christy Barksdale Noble.
Present and yes.
Angela Brooks.
Present and yes.
Paul Haas.
Present, yes.
Christine Cole.
Present, yes.
Steve Manella.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Mattingly. I'm sitting in for Stephen Manella today.
Thank you. Heather Tabbert Mullins.
Yeah, Alex Devlin also sitting in for Heather Mullins today.
Arnold Randall.
Yes, here. And yes on the minutes.
Caitlin Ritter. Susan Campbell.
Hi, I was on mute. Good morning, everyone, and yes on the minutes.
Lisa DiChiera.
Lisa DiChiera, present and yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mackenzie Drews. David Dubois.
Present and yes.
Benjamin Fenton.
I am present and I am a yes on the minutes.
Just going down the list. Nancy. Oh,
yes, present.
Yes. Veronica. Yes. Veronica Gonzalez. Dennis Sandquist.
Hans Mock is substitute for McHenry County, and yes.
Kyle Smith.
I am here and I approve the minutes.
Robert Tucker.
Good morning, Dominic. I'm here and yes on the minutes.
Mark Van Kerkhoff. Eric Wagner.
Good morning, this is Krista Brown. Myself and Dominic Strazer are here in place of Eric for Lake County.
Okay, and that concludes one, and that kind of leads into one of the other announcements we wanted to make. Miriam Zook has left Enterprise Community Partners. She is no longer with them. Filling in and representing Enterprise Community Partners today is Ms. Shanda Christmas Rouse, Program Officer with Enterprise. Are you here, ma'am?
Yes, I'm here, and it's Chandra Christmas Rouse, and voting yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair, that concludes that part.
Great, thank you.
minutes
And
are
I'm sorry, I should have the announcements first, but I got so excited about combining and taking a roll call that I got ahead of myself. Excuse me. Next on the agenda, we are really pleased and honored to have the Executive Director of Cmap with us this morning. So Erin Ailman's here, and she is going to give us an update on what's happening at Cmap.
Great, thank you so much.
Erin.
Thanks, Nancy and Adam, and I'm happy to be here and introduce myself to new folks, and happy to see old faces on the line as well this morning. I wanted to just give the committee a few brief updates. I've been going around to the committees and making sure that we're continuing to stay connected even though we're apart. You know, it's really important for our work to be communicated and for you to understand sort of the conversations that our board is having at the policy level as well here. So I'll just share that at our last meeting, we had asked for the approval of our budget and work plan for fiscal year 2022, and they were both approved through our board and our MPO policy committee meeting. So we are well on our way to hopefully having a signed contract and agreement in hand by the time fiscal year 2022 starts, which is July 1st. A couple other notes of projects that we've got going on right now. At the March meeting, the board also approved an Equitable Engagement RFP. We will be bringing on a consultant here to help us develop a pilot program to address the challenges of engaging community stakeholders who are representative of the region's diversity. You know, one of the things we've really been focused on is really making sure that our work is inclusive. We've also been working on internal inclusion and equity as well, but you know, this contract is really focused on external inclusion and how we can make sure that our projects are really reaching those that you know, we don't traditionally hear from, and that also we're thinking about sort of best practices as we're not only just taking in information from communities that we don't typically work with, but understanding how better to write recommendations and really make sure that those recommendations are sustainable for the projects that we have going on. So that was approved, and we're excited to get to work on that. We'll be working with our partners at CNT and a number of other organizations who will help us think through engaging groups, not only just on specifically if you're thinking about our local planning projects, but really on long-range planning work that we do at the agency as well. So we expect that we'll spend the first chunk of this time really developing sort of a process for getting community engagement and voices at the table. But we hope to have more updates and bring them to you at a future meeting here. So the other thing that we've been working on is doing a call for projects for planning assistance, just given where we are in COVID and thinking about community capacity. One of the things that we were able to do is be a little bit nimble here. We had not planned on having a call for technical assistance projects this year, but we and the RTA thought it was really prudent for us to make sure that we were helping communities who need it most. And so we've developed a number of really sort of small scale tactical technical assistance resources for communities to help them think through getting prepared for being ready to submit projects, I guess, for future funding, whether it's rebuild or whether it's through the American Recovery Act. So really making sure that we have those technical assistance resources for high need communities. So the call was really focused on our highest need communities across the region. And we had 27 requests come in, and we will be able to provide support to 22 of those communities moving forward. We continue to monitor the transportation network and congestion and thinking about recovery. So if you've not heard, we're working on sort of mobility recovery efforts for the region and understanding what might change and how we continue to build confidence in transit, because if people don't go back to transit, and that takes a while for us to get back to where we were, even with people continuing to work from home, we recognize that there has the big potential for us to continue to see congestion increase on our road systems. So this reverberating, interconnected transportation system that we have, we want to make sure that we're making it more resilient. The last thing that I wanted to touch on here, and then I'm happy to take questions from any of our committee members here, is just that we've been monitoring sort of the state and federal legislation and all of the conversations that are happening around transportation reauthorization, but also the reconciliation process at the federal level as well. It appears as though that will be one of the tools that Congress uses to address infrastructure funding moving forward here. So we have been convening and meeting one-on-one with our transportation or with our delegation and the transportation leads for the congressional delegation across our region. We'll be meeting with them again tomorrow to talk through, I'm sure many of you have heard that earmarks are back. They're calling them community projects. I will say that, the earmarks of the past are not what they're doing right now. I think what the approach that they're taking in terms of thinking about projects and funding that can be spent in the next 3 years is a major step forward. And so understanding which projects could have big impact here is what we really want to help our congressional delegation understand and really utilize our tools and resources to help them pick the best projects to apply those funds for. So I'm happy to answer questions in regards to that and sort of what we're watching there and how we're hoping to assist, but or anything else about the agency's work overall. Thanks for the time.
Does anybody have any questions for Erin? They're undertaking a lot of great stuff going forward, and I'm really happy to hear about your doing that. So if there any questions, last call. Okay.
I'll be around and you can chat me too if you need.
Thank you again. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Nancy.
Great. And hopefully you will continue to come to our meetings. We love having you here. So next on the agenda is the Cmap community data snapshots. And as you know, they produce these annually. And if you haven't seen them, you should. They're really helpful and very inclusive, because the data profiles for municipalities and counties in northeastern Illinois, as well as the Chicago community areas. These snapshots summarize demographics, housing, employment, transportation habits, retail sales, property values, and land use. So the staff right now will review content and purpose of the current ones and facilitate a discussion about opportunities to improve them in the future. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them, hopefully you will after, and I know Cmap is always looking for feedback. Hope to ask their questions now, and if they're not all answered today, or if you have some more suggestions, please feel free to send them after the meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, who's going to do this one, Dominic or Erin? Dominic, are you?
I am introducing my colleague, Avery Goods, who will be leading us through this. Avery is, I believe, an assistant planner here with Cmap. Avery, are you there?
I am, yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Good morning and welcome.
Today. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, as Dominic said, my name is Avery Goods, and I'm an assistant analyst here at Cmap. I am here to talk to you today about updates to the community data snapshots and to get your input on how we can improve the snapshots in the future. So I'll start off by giving you a brief overview of what the community data snapshots are and the process behind them. Baked into that section are some changes we're planning to implement for the release in June 2021. After all of that, I'll be asking this group some questions and opening up the floor for your feedback. So next slide, I guess, Matt or Dominic.
Working on it. Hold on a second.
No problem.
Not sure what's going on here. There we go.
Great. So The community data snapshots are a series of annual profiles Cmap generates that summarize data about municipalities, Chicago community areas, and counties in the northeastern Illinois region. So this slide has the different categories of data that are covered in the snapshot. As Nancy mentioned before, there's population demographics, housing, transportation, employment, land use, retail sales, water supply, and Cmap's on to 28 indicators. I think it's important to point out that the snapshots are not reporting any key findings or recommendations. They're not flagging any numbers as good or bad. They're supposed to be really simply designed as a central location for this information about our communities. And we know that for this reason, they're often used by local governments and other organizations as a reference for grant writing. So most of the data in the snapshots come from the Census's American Community Survey. We also incorporate data from the EPA, the Illinois Department of Employment Security, the Illinois Department of Revenue, and other data sets created by Cmap. We're always looking for new data to add to the snapshots. I think I should say that one of the key challenges that we have is finding data that's consistently available across Cmap's 7-county region. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we discuss any potential data additions. Next slide, please. So I pulled out the content that I think this committee would probably be most interested in, and that would be our land use and housing data. So the snapshots currently contain data from the American Community Survey on household characteristics and housing characteristics. So the household characteristics are data related to characteristics more about people in the household. So size in this case is how many people make up the household, and type is if it's a family or non-family household. And then housing characteristics are about the physical characteristics of the household. So size here is how many rooms the house has, and type is how many units are in the building structure. For example, is it a single family detached home or part of a 4-unit building? And then for household and housing characteristics, we have changes over time. So those are between 2000, where the data allows, 2010, and the most recent ACS year. So I believe in the last release, that would have been 2018. And then we also have a section of the snapshot that contains land use data. So general land use comes from Cmap's land use inventory. Park access is also a data point generated by Cmap. We used to derive walkability from walk scores, but in the upcoming 2021 release, we'll be using Cmap's walkability layer, which we find more accurately measures walkability in the region. Next slide, please. So here's a screenshot that I grabbed from a 2020 snapshot for Cicero that I included to give you a sense of how the snapshots are presented. So they're currently made up of tables that contain data from the main community, the county it's located in, and then the region as a whole. So the snapshots are PDFs. They run about 20 pages long, and they can be individually downloaded from our website. They're designed to be pretty easy to read, print out, and grab data from. I'll note here that we are exploring creating a web-based version of the snapshots, but we have no plans to implement this within the next year, and certainly not by the 2021 release. So I'm going to pause for any questions about what the snapshots are and the content in them, because I know that was a lot of information all at once. Okay, if there aren't any questions about the snapshot content, I think we can move on to the next slide. So I'd like to give you a brief overview of the quality control process that occurs after we've gathered the data and generated the initial snapshots every year. So currently we have 3 rounds of internal review. So this starts with the research and analysis team, which is the team that develops the snapshots, then moves to staff and planning and implementation and government affairs. They're pretty helpful because they're a little more familiar with the communities that we work with and work with them more regularly. And lastly, our communications teams review the snapshots before they're published. After every round of review, we make revisions until the snapshots are ready to be published on our website. We also publish the raw data that goes into the snapshots as massive CSV files to the Cmap Data Hub. So those are publicly available as well. One thing we're going to test out in the next cycle is this third point here, which is sending the snapshots out for external beta testing before the snapshots are published. So we're imagining that our external testers will be in local governments or expert stakeholders who are more familiar with their communities than we are and can provide feedback on how well the snapshots capture their communities. Next slide, please. So currently, one of the main ways we solicit feedback about the snapshots is a survey that's linked on the snapshot webpage, as well as on the snapshots themselves. Every year we get a couple of responses to this survey. It's also anonymous. So on this slide, I have some of the suggestions that I've pulled from the survey for data to include in the snapshots. So as you can see, people are interested in maybe some data more about children, some housing data, some public health data, crime data, more data on people with disabilities, and then more data on retail sales. I definitely note that for some of these, we're probably not going to be able to get reliable data, and they likely won't all be included in the snapshots anytime soon, but I think it's still good to give you an idea of the feedback that we've already received. I also, one thing that stands out to me here is the interest in the average home value and rent cost with change over time. I think that indicates that there's interest and maybe room for the snapshots to capture housing trends better than they are now. Okay, next slide, please. So I have some questions prepared for this committee, and I think that this screen generally captures the questions I'm about to ask, the categories of them. So the first one is really thinking about, are there any other data points about communities that you would like to see reported in future snapshots? And then the second is how else Cmap could improve the snapshots to be more useful for that work. So while that being said, I'll dive into the first question that I have here. And that is, where are folks in this committee currently going to get their data related to housing or land use in the region? That's not the community data snapshot.
I can talk about where we currently source our data from on the development front, if that's helpful. This is Christine Cobb from Graystar. But typically, if we're exploring investment in a community, we'll look at some of the source data that you pointed to from the census or community surveys. And then we're very interested in valuation information. So we spend a lot of time on CoStar or Axiometrics and some of the data providers that look at value of real estate. That's one, and I'll just add to that in terms of additional pieces that could be interesting to see. Like if you were pulling up a community snapshot on Joliet, might be interesting to know if they have an affordable housing ordinance, and then also how the average median income transposes to levels of affordability that you typically see with those ordinances, like a 60% AMI affordability threshold.
Definitely, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Tony Mattingly from Metra. I'll just briefly state that we have been looking at data from Redfin in their data portal about home sales at the county level, kind of across the region. So that's another source beyond the community snapshots that we look at.
Excellent. Yeah, we have not looked at Redfin yet.
Hi, it's Susan from Cook County. In addition to Cmap, we also work closely with the DePaul Housing Institute and have been using some of their data sets and also providing data to them. And then we have a first-time down payment assistance program that we're working with a private vendor, Lakeview, and are getting data from them as well in regards to the foreclosure data. by municipality in the county, which is something that private bankers tend to have access to, but I think is enormously helpful for all of us on the call. You know, from our own programs, we're also generating data as a result from the last year with our providers. CoStar we use as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I always forget about DuPaul's housing tools, and they're really useful.
This is Christy Noble from the city of Yorkville. When we research data, we also use ESRI's data because it's part of our GIS and mapping database as well.
Great, thank you. So the next question is maybe covered a bit in the last question. But yeah, is there any data you can think of that Cmap could add that would make the snapshots more useful for your work?
Christy again from Yorkville. Have you considered adding real estate tax rates or any real estate taxing information, maybe how it's distributed, what portion goes to what taxing body?
I don't believe we have considered that, but yeah, I will raise that with the team that works on this.
Christy, can I pop in here and just ask a follow-up clarifying question too? Because I think that's an interesting suggestion, and I'd love to hear how that would be helpful to you as you do your work in Yorkville.
Well, I don't necessarily know at this point how helpful it would be to us because we could go to the county as well, but it may be helpful for comparison information just to have it in one location. So if someone's looking to land in Yorkville, we can send them to a site where they can compare tax rates with Yorkville and another community.
Thanks. Thanks for letting me pop in there, Avery.
Yeah, of course. So at this time, are there any other questions or do we have? I have a couple more questions if that's all right. Absolutely. Okay. So I'd also like to know if any of your organizations prepare any data that you think should be or could be included in the snapshots. I know we have some folks from the counties here and would be especially interested in hearing from them.
Sure. Hi, it's Susan again. Yeah, we're happy to share, whatever the data is that we're collecting. It's fairly interesting, although it would be pertinent to the programs that we're actually running as opposed to global condition data by the county. So we just have to be within that context, but we're happy to share.
Got it. Yeah, thank you.
This is Adam. I'm not with the county, and this is back to your previous question about other data points. I know ACS has at least self-report disability data. It might be good to include that as well. Where, and if possible, like map it to like where, not just how many people identify as having a disability in these communities, but where they live.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at adding disability data to the snapshots. I don't know if we'd be able to map it now the way the snapshots are presented, but maybe if we, move to more of a web-based mapping tool, that could definitely be a possibility.
Yeah, that might be a future project, but I think at least getting the percentages in their snapshots for now would be helpful too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, sort of related to Adam's points, do you have any recommendations regarding data presentation as we're thinking about making more of a web-based tool? We have some room to imagine what that might look like. So are there any preferences that you guys have for the format of this kind of data profile?
If it could somehow be linked to a map, I just always think that's helpful.
Yeah, so currently on the Cmap webpage, we do have a map where you can select a community and it will pull up the snapshot right there for you.
I mean, and I wonder if like an executive summary level, like 1 or 2 page snapshot for each community that could be sent to, you know, leaders in each community, as well as just kind of even an introduction to the tool, right? Like here's a snapshot of your community and here's where you can find out more with you know, a link to the tool or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Are you imagining the executive summary would have like any key information or just more an overview of what the snapshots are?
I mean, it could be, I mean, it'd be an overview, I think mainly an overview, but then like, you know, pick out 2 or 3 data points that you think really pop for that specific community that make that community unique, you know, and say, you know, here's some things about your community that maybe you know, you weren't even aware of. We certainly weren't until we looked into it, you know, just as a hook to say, oh, this tool can teach us things we didn't know or help guide our planning in ways that we hadn't really thought of.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would be great to make them a little more engaging.
I have a user experience comment, having been looking at these on the Cmap website recently. I know that you have regional benchmarks as well for all of these numbers, but they're actually not on the same page as the counties and municipalities. So it could be helpful to have a quick link near the municipalities or counties for anyone that's looking to compare the numbers to the regional baseline.
So like a separate snapshot that's just for the region to compare?
Yeah, I forget what I was looking for. I think I was comparing median incomes or something like that, and was surprised with how comprehensive all of the Cmap stuff is that I couldn't easily find it.
Yeah, we can definitely look at making that easier to compare.
This is Caitlin Ritter. I think it would be really helpful to anytime you can have something like downloadable to Excel format, whether it's like maybe all the data or even just community by community. To me, that's always helpful because otherwise I'm entering it all into Excel myself.
Yeah, so we have the raw data and the CSVs, but yeah, I agree that it would be really helpful to have the tables actually formatted nicely in an Excel file that you could download as well.
Thanks, Avery. Do you have other questions, or was that the extent of the questions you had?
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Yeah, thanks everyone for your time.
That was great. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the great feedback from the committee members.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And it's such a useful tool, so it's always great to have it even enhanced more. So thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Homes for a Changing Region, which is a project I am fairly familiar with since I'm one of the, I've been involved with it since its inception, being one of the originators of the project. So Homes for a Changing Region, some of you may be familiar with, I'm not sure how many are, but it's a collaboration that provides technical assistance to help municipal leaders address pressing housing issues. And it is a partnership currently. It's a partnership between Cmap and the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. And we are joined here today with my partners, Kyle Smith from the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, Enrique Castillo and Diana Martinez from Cmap. And I would like to also just thank Ida, who has generously given us the support to do this program through their Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And they have become an unofficial partner. So we thank them again for their help with it, because they also contribute in a lot more ways than just resources. A little very short history of homes. It began 14 years ago. And it's gone through several iterations since that time. And during that time, we have actually worked with 56 communities throughout the Cmap region. It began when we recognized that the demographics were really beginning to change, and you could actually measure them, particularly the growing Hispanic community at that time and the aging population, which still continues to grow. And it was a different way of looking at planning. We looked at planning by people. What were their needs? What were their housing needs? So we kind of like to say it was planning for people, not buildings. And what we developed with these communities over about a year to an 18-month time frame was forward-looking housing policy plans. So that address the housing needs of current and future residents going out. You know, how should you think about what kind of housing needs did you have as you continue to change and grow? But as we all know, 2008 changed quite a bit in the housing market. It certainly made everybody realize that housing needs became critical and immediate. We saw what happened with the housing and how it affected people. So with that, we did change our process, and actually we adjusted our work to a shorter, much more targeted process with the community. And with that, we created what we call a housing action plan that helps the communities understand the housing trends as they continue, but really addresses their current challenges. And so today what we would like to do is we're actually going to do some breakouts where we can show you the process, and at the end we're actually going to be looking for some input from you to maybe help us. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to my colleague Kyle Smith from the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus to take you briefly through our process, very briefly. And after that, we will do breakouts and really show you, have you go through a couple of communities and continue giving us, because one of the differences, after we give them an action plan, we want to help them implement. And that's where the challenges begin. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Nancy. Actually, before I start, maybe it would make sense to do just a very quick round of introductions from all of us on the project, since we're all partners in this, and those of us doing the talking and slides, you know, we're equal partners with everyone else. So Enrique or Diana, if you would introduce yourselves, and then I'll continue where Nancy left off.
Sure, I can go next. First of all, thanks everyone for inviting us to join you all today. We really look forward to the discussion that we're going to have here in a few minutes. But I'm Enrique Castillo. I'm an associate planner here at Cmap. I've been with Cmap for a little over 3 years, and I do housing work with Cmap. So.
It's Enrique. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here as well. Diana Martinez, an assistant planner here with Cmap as well, and we're very excited about today's discussion on homes.
Great, and I'm Kyle Smith, and I'm with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and happy to be here talking to you all. I think one of the things that is amazing about Homes for a Changing Region is that it has been a very long-standing partnership between multiple organizations, and it's gone through many iterations, as Nancy mentioned. But it's very much a partnership between the Mayor's Caucus and Cmap, and it's in its current iteration MPC as well. One of the things that is relatively new about the current iteration of Homes, which Nancy also mentioned, is that we are partners with IDA, and we've worked closely with Ben Fenton, who's here as well. And we are funded through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to do this work. Next slide. So the current iteration of Homes for Changing Region, which has been in place since 2018, is funded through IDA via the Illinois Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which was established to create and preserve affordable housing for low and moderate income households in the state. This is the purpose of the trust fund. It is also the North Star to the work that we do. In some cases, it is very straightforward when we're talking about adding or preserving affordable housing units. But we do work in a lot of policy areas that advance this indirectly as well, including some of our discussions today. Next slide. So you can click the slide a couple of times. There we go. Our organizations have been at this a long time, and we have streamlined our process from what we were doing at the very beginning. In the first few communities that we worked in, some of the 56 that Nancy mentioned, we were doing full-blown housing policy plans. And then we expanded from there to do interjurisdictional plans throughout the region. One of the things that our organizations learned doing that work is the things that were the most valuable to municipalities were receiving a data baseline to give them a basic understanding of housing in their town. The stakeholder discussion that came out of that, and a few short-term recommendations and awareness of funding sources that they can get working on right away. We also found that the longer-term planning process tended to lose them a little bit. And so we during this iteration, we streamlined it down to a quick-moving process focused on the things that benefit communities the most. So our process is basically 3 meetings. At our first meeting, we do a needs assessment of data, including the community snapshot data, as well as other data from DePaul and other sources, to give communities the baseline they need to discuss housing issues and spark conversations among those in the room. Our second part of the process is usually the keystone, which is that we assemble an expert panel to discuss 2 to 4 housing issues identified in the baseline. And these are very different from community to community. In some communities, that might be adding new affordable housing units. In other communities, it might be preserving the affordable housing that they have, whether it is rental or home ownership. And in yet other communities, it may be stabilizing residential property and ensuring that it is of high quality and encouraging investment in the future. There's no one size fits all to doing these panels, but we found that they are a very productive way to have exchange between the local municipal stakeholders involved and policy experts in these areas. And then finally, we write up an action plan. So during that expert panel, Enrique, Diana, Nancy, and myself try and sit back as much as possible, listen to the exchange between the expert panelists and the folks in the room, and write up an action plan that we believe are in the voice of the stakeholders that have heard out some policy ideas or available funding in the different areas of policy that I mentioned. Next slide. So we are finishing our current round now. Over the last 3 years, we've worked with 10 communities all across the region. Our 10 are up here on the screen. They're communities big and small. We've worked in a community as large as Naperville. We've worked in communities as small as Broadview and Sauk Village. And we've been able to customize the assistance to all of these towns. I think the important thing to keep in mind with homes is that wherever we work, there is no one size fits all. to making housing recommendations. What is adding units in one community, maybe preserving them in another, and that maybe stabilizing them in a third, or even working in code enforcement and property maintenance issues. We're very proud of the diversity of communities that we've served. Next slide. So as all of us talked about this, we thought that maybe the best way to use our time today would be focused on two communities that had a very unique set of issues that weren't like the others. And those are Beach Park in northeast Lake County, north of Waukegan, and Oak Forest in South Cook County, along the I-57 corridor. We'll talk about some of the issues in these communities a little bit more in the two breakout groups, but we just want to give you a sense of the types of challenges that each of them were encountering. So in both of these communities, and this is true in many communities that we serve, the aging population was one of the top housing issues that folks talk about. In Beach Park, 20% of homeowners are above 65, and more will be entering that range soon. In Oak Forest, 50% of homeowners are above 55 in the next 10 years without new homeowners in the community. Nearly half of that community's homeowners might be above retirement age. Beach Park is encountering some housing unaffordability in its rental stock, which we'll talk more about in the breakout groups because they are predominantly in mobile homes, but 1 out of 4 renters in the community is paying more than 30% of its income on housing. And that mobile home park community is largely disconnected from the remainder of the town. It's along a pretty busy commercial corridor. It's not readily connected with some of the residential neighborhoods. And it's a pretty significant chunk of their residential base. 1 out of every 10 units are mobile homes. Oak Forest was encountering a very different kind of issue. Oak Forest has some rental housing, but they need more. And 2 out of every 3 homes in that community are owner occupied. But the community has been very resistant to consider new multifamily in some areas. I'll go backward. Everything's up to code, but they're looking to spur additional investor, additional property management investor in some of their stock. And as a result, there are housing unaffordability issues in the community as well. So I think that the plan here is to go to breakout groups into each of these two communities. And I don't know if I'm the one to discuss that or someone else is. But these are two unique, these two communities are unique relative to other towns where we've done plans.
Okay, and before we move to the breakouts, could I add one thing that I think might be of interest? When Kyle referred to breakout groups, not breakout, I'm sorry, the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? We make sure that the mayor is definitely one of the stakeholders, as well as 1 or 2 elected officials. In addition to that, of course, will be some staff that are involved with housing at different levels. And also we bring in community members and we try to diversify them, hitting groups that all have relevance to housing, has relevance to, whether they are a senior that lives there, whether they are involved with the school district, whether they are part of a business community, whether they just are a community member who lives in one of the neighborhoods. So we try to diversify that. It's kind of like a mini focus group with elected officials and also some staff members. We feel it's really important to engage at least the mayor, because if the mayor's engaged, it will hopefully raise his importance to the board. So with that, I guess, are we going to be, yes.
I'm sorry, I wanted to add a few more things to that before we go into breakouts. You know, I think it's really important to, one, understand how important the qualitative and quantitative data is here. When we come together as a group, this is where we want to meet both of those at the fork, right? And make sure that the data is matching up with what the community is seeing. And a lot of times, it does match up, but a lot of times we learn even more about like the background behind the data, right? They also point out other issues or opportunities that they're seeing in their community that may not come out through the research and the analysis that we do. So I think that's really important and key when we're thinking about putting together the expert panelists that we bring to the community. And then the last thing that I also want to know is that these two communities that we're going to be doing breakouts, we've already wrapped these up. We've gone through the whole process and we've put together the action plan, and we're already starting to work with these communities with implementation on some of the recommendations. Because the recommendations that we put together, a lot of times are very actionable, right? They're actions that they can take on as soon as that expert panel is complete and they receive the action plan, by us helping them, you know, make connections or helping them, you know, reach out to the right person in order to get the ball moving. So.
Thanks,
You're very
Enrique.
good. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. Diana, do you have something to add as well?
No, I think we're ready to go to the breakout rooms for the sake of time. Thank you.
Right. And just a quick overview of the breakout rooms. We, the liaisons worked on dividing the members up into based on their background knowledge and trying to have a balance between the two rooms before that. But we will be coming together after that to just talk in general, and we look forward to having a variety of comments. So thank you.
Great. So.
Wow,
Kyle,
that went real quick.
Kyle, you can feel free to reach out to me directly in terms of attracting new development. Happy to provide some feedback on what we're seeing in terms of pricing for building new, and then sort of incentives and what would be helpful to help facilitate new development. Just reach out and maybe we can hop on a call and walk through some things.
I was muted. That sounds great. We work in a number of moderate income communities, you know, or above median, but not well above median communities where the cost of construction is a barrier. So
yeah, there's just a huge push right now from investors that are interested in garden style, more attainable housing in the type of markets that you're describing. So that's, you know, typically 2-story, walk up, non-elevator, but happy to walk through that with you.
yeah, and actually that's a good segue. We had a third community, you know, we just wanted to spark some additional discussion. Our last engagement is underway in Warrenville. And what we've learned from Warrenville, we've learned many things. So I'm glossing over some of the housing data that will also drive some other recommendations. They're very interested in that, in what you've described, and what we were talking about in our breakout room as well, with like cottages, ADUs, etc. Missing middle housing. This community, Warrenville, is a fairly prosperous middle class community in DuPage County. It's surrounded by communities that are seeing a lot of housing investments, in particular Naperville. And because of that, they've seen a lot of large campus style multifamily that's also very expensive. So in addition to the affordability question, they're trying to think through what they could add that is still in the middle, both in terms of price point, as well as urban form. And if anyone has seen this chart from the last 5 years, this is a common one in presentations to talk through the missing middle, everything between the single family house and the large multifamily building. One of the things that we found, we're putting together an expert panel for them now. We don't have a lot of examples that we're aware of from our region where there's been housing that checks off all of these buckets. There are a few communities that have allowed ADUs. There are some developments that are more of the duplex style in Skokie, Libertyville, etc., but their price points are actually pretty expensive. And you know, there are a few cottage developments that we're aware of, but we're looking for more. So we thought that it would be a good exercise to just hear examples that others are aware of across the region. I think this is probably going to be the area of growth that more and more communities are going to be looking for examples of other communities that have done this successfully.
Kyle, I think you may end up also looking a little bit out of state, but still in the region. Like I think the Milwaukee area has probably done a good job in this sort of more diversified housing type of mix. So, you know, smaller cities, smaller primary cities like a Milwaukee, Madison, you know, that can still be translatable to a large suburban community in some ways.
Yeah, I would agree. There's definitely, particularly in the Southwest and Southeast, a lot of examples of single family rental communities, purpose-built rental, townhomes, kind of smaller lot line. But we also have those around here. I'm not sure if you've ever worked with Riva Development or Kinsey Builders, but they are very prolific in this space. So like the Oaks of Vernon Hills, for example, is a great example of the sort of walk-up garden style apartment complex, and then also attached housing, so series of row homes all there, and it's all a rental community, but it's probably on about 24 acres, I'd say. And like I mentioned, there's just a huge push right now and appetite to do this type of development that is more of a volume play as opposed to a price luxury play. the difficulty that we run into, that I've run into looking at these opportunities throughout really the entire upper Midwest, is the fact that construction costs are just so high here relative to the amount of rent that we're trying to target to make it that attainable housing. And when we look at, you know, the cost to build a wrap style building where you're building structured parking and it's 3 or 4 stories and you're paying somewhere around $130 per gross foot. And then you look at something that's more of a garden style execution. Now you're only $120 a gross foot, but you're still trying to target rents that are maybe 30 or 40% less than what you were charging for a wrap product. It's much harder to do here. And then we're also just incredibly stressed right now from a supply and pipeline of actual construction material. So like the lumber market has been bananas over the last year. I think it increased like 400% just so far in the last 6 months. So even trying to look at evolving the building codes that as you had mentioned, to provide not just non-combustible construction, the pipeline of wood frame product that's absolutely off the charts throughout much of the rest of the country is also impacting us here and making things even tighter. But I could send you a list of projects that we've been looking at for comps for that kind of attainable housing, because there are more of them than you think. It's just maybe it doesn't look exactly like this.
I think we love that, and I would add that I think that this is just an area that's relatively new, you know, as opposed to light tech projects, for example, which is very easy to figure out where those are. So any information that you have, like, we would devour. We're eager to build out the case studies in this.
Happy to do that. Also have to just throw out that I grew up in Warrenville, and it is a great community, but it definitely is in the shadows of Wheaton and Naperville. But it's like a phenomenal small suburb.
Yeah, I do want to add one last thing that it came up from the community was, you know, they're also concerned that, you know, with the amount of new development coming in, is there infrastructure set up for it? You know, do they have the current amenities that would supply, you know, food and all the other things, you know, when you bring in this amount of new development to the community? So that's something that we also are kind of grappling with is, you know, how do we address that and how do we present that to the community?
Did you say provide food?
Just amenities, you know, all the types of amenities.
Well, I think if I could add that what's happening in Warrenville is they are adding over 1,000 units of rental housing now. It's more the luxury level. But the question, I guess the big question was, are there enough of the supports that you look for in a community to support that, such as grocery stores? I mean, they have them, not that they're not a food desert, but we're adding all of these new residents. You know, is there enough open space? Is there enough, you know, the things that you look at to make a community a place that you want to be? So if, I guess since we're getting near the end of our time, unfortunately, we thank you all for all your input. It's been really helpful to the team, our team. If anybody has suggestions for us, we would welcome them with open arms. You can send them to either any of us, or hopefully Matthew or Dominic would pass them on to us. So we really are looking, we're always looking for as much information as we can get, and as many examples, good examples out there.
Hey, Dominic or Matthew or someone from Cmap, are you guys capturing what's in the chat too?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, some of it's mine, but
and
Christy had a really good comment too.
No, and actually your comments are well taken, and that is always an issue. We know that the accessibility is an issue for a lot of these new types of development, particularly when they're smaller. So something, you know, so Adam, we'll look for your input as well.
Yeah, and finally, I think the last slide has our contact information, and like Nancy was alluding to, The Homes team is anticipating additional funding for a new round of Homes for a Changing Region. We're hoping to get a word hopefully soon in the next coming weeks or so. So like Nancy mentioned, if you have community suggestions, the Homes team is pretty open to hearing what some communities in our region might need this partnership.
Yeah. So with that, we thank you, and I think we'll move on. I think we have community member updates. If we have, do we have many? No, we've only got, let's see, where are we in time wise? We only have a few minutes left. So does anybody have an update that we would love to hear about? And if you have future ones for the next meeting, you know, let us know ahead of time so we can make sure that we add it, have time, leave time for it to make, for sure. And if there are no actual updates, is there any other business that anybody would like to bring to us?
Hi, Nancy.
All right. Well,
sorry, I just wanted to make a quick plug. Hi, how are you doing? Can't find my controls to take my video, put my video back on.
That's quite all right. Why don't you
Okay.
give it? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that the county extended its rental assistance program through the end of this week to allow folks more opportunities to apply. We've got great response so far, but we have a ton of money to get out. So please, please share with everyone you know that there's a online portal. If they go to cookcountyrecovery or cookcountyil.gov/recovery, they'll be able to access all this information. And there's also information there about the city and the state's programs as well, which will be opening in a few weeks. But we're really trying to get the funding out to everyone we can now so that it doesn't have to get returned to Treasury in September. We have some good upticks, but in some of the communities that have a lot of renters, really, I was just in the Oak Forest chat, you know, we could see greater representation. So we would appreciate your partnership.
Did you put that in the? Did you put that information in the website, the portal?
Yeah. Yes.
That'd be great, and anybody can capture it before we leave.
Okay.
If I may.
Any other?
Oh.
Go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
Please.
I'm sorry. We're all kind of talking over one another. The Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus has had a couple of meetings of our housing committee, and they're very interested in the rental assistance programs and up-to-date information. So I am happy to send out any information from any administering entity to our contacts to help get the word out.
Okay. If we have any other business, oh, go ahead.
And we'll no, I was just going to say we'll circulate some of those contacts. Maybe can we do that to the community? Yep, that'd be great. So everybody will have it. And at this time, is there any public comment? I don't even know if we have public.
Staff received no public comment from via email.
Okay.
And then.
All right.
And our next meeting is June 1st.
Right. So our next meeting is June 1st. I think we are about at time. So with that, I guess we will call this meeting to an end. Do I need a motion to call it to an end? Yes. Can I have a motion to end the meeting?
So moved.
Somebody wants to end the meeting? Thank you. Is there a second? Somebody second the end of this meeting. Thank you. Do we need a roll call?
No, we don't.
For this, or can we just do voice?
Nope, that's that. The second is fine.
Thank you all for meeting. Wonderful. All right. Well, then we will see you all in our next meeting, I hope. And enjoy the rest. Hopefully things will be much better by then, and hopefully sometime we'll actually meet in person. Looking forward to that. Goodbye.
Thank
all.
you all.
Everyone. Bye.
And before that, I don't know if all of you know, but I had been a mayor of Glenview. So this project, I love planning, and anyway, so that's why I'm here, and we want to pass it on. Enrique, you want to?
Yeah, let's jump up here, and I'll just call on the few photos that are here, and then we'll let everyone else that's on audio introduce themselves. But Kate, is it Katie? Do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm Katie Friedman. I'm a project manager at the Mayor's Caucus, and I'm providing support to our Age-Friendly Communities Collaborative, our Diversity Issues Task Force, and I manage our AmeriCorps program.
Great. Bob, do you want to go next, please?
Yeah, sure. Bob Tucker, I'm the COO of the Chicago Community Loan Fund. And Enrique, I know you're going to say this is not a competition, but I do expect our breakout team to win.
See, I have Dominic.
Dominic Strazo. I'm with Lake County Community Development.
Okay. Angela.
I am Angela Brooks. I'm the director of the Illinois Office of the Corporation for Supportive Housing as of the last 90 days. And before that, I was the development manager with the Chicago Housing Authority.
Great. I have Hans.
Hi, yes, Hans Mock, Community Development Administrator for McHenry County.
Great. And then I have Jamie.
Hi, good morning. Jamie Jackson with Cmap. I'm relatively new to Cmap, so just here to learn about the committee's work and all the great housing work that we are doing in partnership with the Mayor's Caucus.
Great. And then if people on the phone want to just jump in, that'd be great.
Sure. This is Krista Brown. I'm the planning and zoning manager with Lake County Planning, Building, and Development.
Great.
And I'm Tony Mattingly from Metro.
This is Chandra Christmas-Rouse from Enterprise Community Partners.
Who else hasn't gone? And Brianna, we haven't heard from you.
Hi, everyone. I'm a planning intern at Cmap. I'm here to take notes.
Okay, Brianna, well, we see your face, and so we want to make sure everybody knows who you are.
All right.
Yeah,
anyone
else who has not?
All right. So, well, let's jump into it because I know we are restricted or have a timeline here. We were given 15 minutes, so let's jump into it. So as Kyle introduced the work that we were doing with Beach Park, I think one of the things that I want to do is quickly, now that you know the process, right? The first thing that we did was the housing analysis. Then we put together the expert panel. And then after that, we put together the action plan. But one of the things that I want to do real quickly is talk about the expert panelists that we brought in, because that's really going to be based off of the key themes that we saw and then the recommendations that we made, right? So the panelists, and one of the things that I also want to note was this was the first community that we did, Nancy, do you remember, going into COVID? So before COVID, we would be in the community, we would have these breakout sessions with them. It was 2 meetings, but because of COVID, we had to figure out how to go remote and virtually. So this was actually our guinea pig, and we had decided to actually break it up into 2 different meetings, just because our expert panel group was fairly large, and we didn't know how that was going to go with the community and the stakeholders. So we broke it up into 2, and we realized that we wanted to keep them together mostly because when we bring in the expert panelists, we want them to bounce ideas off of each other, and that's how we come up with a lot of the recommendations is just based on the conversation that is being held in that room during the expert panelist time. So we did realize that, and we went back to the structure where it's just 1, and we extended the time. So it is a long meeting. It's an hour and a half, sometimes up to 2 hours, but we get a great conversation. And for Beach Park, the expert panelists consisted of David Nelson, who is a city administrator for the city of Harvard, Don Owen, who's a deputy manager for the village of Glenview, Rob Anthony, who's the president of Community Partners of Affordable Housing, also known as SEPA, and then Amy Bishadi, who is the Community Revitalization Planning Specialist for IDA, and then Bill Edemeyer, who is the Senior Program Officer for IDA. So that
And
was,
if I,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, if I can too, if I, just one quickly, I just want to, so you understand this panel, how it works. We had already identified the issues or the things that we wanted to deal with, the challenges that Beach Park had. So we matched up each challenge with somebody in the region who had a similar challenge and was working on it. And this meeting, we do nothing at the meeting. Basically, it's a conversation between our stakeholder group and the expert panelists so that they can share and ask these experts, well, how did you do this? What about that? And that's kind of the purpose of it, is to get to know each other and think about things that they can do in their own community. And with that, go ahead, Enrique. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. Matt, is it you that's here with us running the show?
Yep.
Do you mind advancing to the next slide? So these were our key findings. These were our trends, right? Based on the housing analysis that we do. And we actually forwarded everybody the action plan, and we attached the housing analysis that we do to the end of that, so you could see or have an idea. And if you don't have one, you can find them actually on the link on the webpage for your committee. But it's a full housing analysis, but these were the trends, right? We saw that Beach Park residents are aging in place, especially homeowners. 2 out of 10 owners are over the age of 65. And I do want to note that this is something that every community that we worked with has this in common. So that's the one thing that we did see throughout the 10 communities that we saw was aging in place. Some rental housing is unaffordable. 1 out of 4 renters are paying more than 30% of their income. And then other rental housing is affordable and can be preserved because 1 out of 10 residential unit are mobile homes. So there's a mobile home park in the community. Actually, there's a couple, but they're all concentrated in the same area on the east side of Sheridan in the community. So they're all clustered together. And then last, we saw that there's an opportunity to better integrate the mobile home parks along Sheridan, right? So that's not a surprise that these mobile home parks are clustered together. They're seeing a lot of affordable housing is within the mobile parks. But one thing that we did see was that there was a little bit of disconnect between the mobile home park and the community in itself. And one of the things that I do want to point out is that this came up quite a bit. This is where, you know, unless the data didn't show a whole lot there, right? There's not a whole lot of meat to that bone unless you have that conversation with the community. And when we invited the stakeholders to the first meeting, it came up and people came up to me afterwards and we're talking about how, like, you know, there's an opportunity to help those that live in the mobile home park. You know, they want to become homeowners and they want to live in the community, but there's a disconnect there. You know, how do we do that? So that's how this became a very big topic within the community. And that's how we brought in the extra panelists, as Nancy was saying. You know, we paired them up. We go back and we think about, okay, where have we seen these trends, right? And who has a success story from you know, overcoming some of these trends? And that's how we bring in the expert panelists. So Nancy, did you want to add something?
No, I think that's
okay. Matt, can you advance to the next slide, please? And so from that analysis, those conversations, the expert panelists, we came up with 5 short recommendations here. So the first one was to encourage a corridor-wide plan for Sheridan Road with a strong focus on housing and commercial development. So here we saw that, you know, they had some vacant parcels that were vacant. Some of them are owned by the community. So there's a real opportunity here for them to study that corridor a little bit better. And they're, even with their vacant parcels, as number 3, develop senior housing along Sheridan Road to meet the growing demand was an opportunity. but it has to be fleshed out a little bit more. But we did see that there is an opportunity there. Not to mention that they've already done some planning work in the community. They are, I believe they were in the middle of doing a transportation improvement. I think it's a Northern Lakeshore Trail connectivity plan that we're doing, and it did, there's a recommendation there. Also identifying the Sheridan Road should be looked at a little bit closer. And if you don't know geographically anything about this community, it's very close to the lake. And one of the things that we saw is, so it's Sheridan Road, and then it's the mobile home parks, and then it's a forest preserve, and then it's the lake. So it's a very attractive land area. And so, people are starting to wonder, like, what can we do with this area if we're looking to develop further along. So and so then that's where, again, the conversation where integrate the mobile home park with the broader community was very significant. I want to talk about how we brought in one of the expert panelists was from the Village of Harvard. And Cmap and the Mayor's Caucus, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, developed a toolkit. It's called the Immigration Integration Toolkit. And this toolkit really talks about integrating this community into the broader community, right? There's language barriers. There's also some sorts of social barriers, economic barriers that disconnect this population from the rest of the community. So Harvard talked about how they are using it, right, to socially integrate the community into the broader community. But more than anything, one of the things that we thought was very unique is how they were using this toolkit, that the majority of the toolkit is designed to socially integrate the immigrant community into the community, but they started using it in a different way. They started using it in a way where they can look at infrastructure changes in the community to really integrate the community, right? They're looking at the integration barriers, right? The infrastructure barriers to integrate the community. And so they had been working with HUD and CBDG funds to really talk about sidewalks. We know that Sheridan Road doesn't have a whole lot of sidewalks along its corridor, right? So that's already an issue number one, that you would think, okay, well, if there's not even a sidewalk into the community from these mobile parks, how can we change that? So that recommendation is one of the bigger recommendations, and we already are helping them move the needle with that one. We're helping them partner up with Lake County and talk about some infrastructure funds that they could use to see if there can be some integration. So that conversation is already happening between them. And so that's an example of how we've used other resources internally, right, toolkits, and then experts in other communities. And then the fourth one was advertise homeowners and rehab programs. So through SEPA and IDA, there's a long list of resources, right? All the way from homeowner tax credits to aging in place tax credits or funding that can help seniors age in their homes. So I think one of the biggest things there was bringing Rob Anthony, that has a slew of resources to talk about how they have been used in their community in the Round Lakes area, and how they can help them establish something like that as well. And then last was to explore a renters' rights program, because we did hear from the community that there are some landlords that have neglected some of the properties. So again, through SEPA and through IDA, we're able to offer some resources that could help them establish a renters' rights programs, right, to address the quality of the housing that's available to the residents in the community. So I do want to pause there because I gave you a lot.
I may add let me add one or two little things to that as well, because you probably figured out with what Enrique had said, that the mobile home park is where a number of the Hispanic community is moving. And so it's how do you better integrate it, which is why we brought in other communities that have been trying to do that as well. because we feel it's important that they're not only a barrier, physical barrier, but you still have that social barrier. So we had some conversations around that. And why Sheridan Road is so important is it's a pretty built out community, but Sheridan Road is changing. You know, it's got some commercial that is probably not going to last over the long run, and they recognize that. They have some areas that are already up on the market. And so this is an area that could be ripe for redevelopment. So that's one of the reasons why Sheridan Road became a focus of a lot of their thinking and then our work. And so we did talk a lot about that and the opportunity to integrate housing and commercial along there in a better way and address some of the issues that they have. And as far as their aging community, they've got a lot of homeowners there that live in their single family homes, which is what the majority of the rest of the community is. And there are a lot of residents there that have been there a long time and they love the community and they really don't want to move. So it's making sure that they can stay there. Their houses remain safe, healthy. So those are the types of issues that we did get into in more detail as we were talking with the community.
Yeah, and Matt, if you don't mind just bringing us all back together, because the next part of this presentation was the discussion. But yeah, we want to open it up for thoughts. You know, we want to build our, one of the things that we want to do, we're hoping, is to build, you know, the list of resources or the best practices that we might not know about, but as we're looking into the next round of homes communities. So I'll stop talking and I'll let people maybe give some comments and their thoughts.
Yeah, feel free to use the chat box if you want, if just want to give us some thoughts, but if you want to, we'd love to hear from you as well. And we unfortunately can't see each other at the moment, but just call out your thoughts if you haven't. Oh, there we go.
I'm curious as to, I know ADUs is a real big hot button right now. Why or why not that wasn't considered as one of the initial recommendations?
Probably because it didn't enter into part of the conversations, but it doesn't mean that it's something that cannot be considered, you know, in the future. I think we spent so much time really talking about Sheridan Road and the mobile home parks, because there's issues with the mobile home parks too. There's concern on some of the stakeholders that were there that there was properties that could be developed along Sheridan Road, but their proximity to mobile home parks they thought was going to not not going to work. So we spent a lot of time saying, no, it can work, and going through and giving examples, which is one of the reasons we had Donna from Glenview there, because Glenview does have a mobile home park that built some very lovely upscale homes right adjacent to it with a shared playground and a shared jogging trail, and that trying to allay the fears that people have. So I think probably it's because we didn't have enough time, if you really want me to be honest. We focus on where they are really focused, but it is a great suggestion, and that's why we love to have, why we're doing this, because it doesn't mean we can't come back to them with it. Because part of our purpose is to stay with these communities for at least as long as we can and continue to work with them and addressing the issues. So that's a great question.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll add to it is like, yeah, we did run out of time. These are meant to be, you know, quick. The process is a lot quicker than doing like a full-blown plan. But you know, we did have communities like Naperville where it did come up, and the recommendations had a lot of conversations around that as well.
So we're going to run out of time, but if anybody has more thoughts and would love to let us know, please, you know, go through our committee if you want to send emails, or to us. We'll leave our contact information as well, because we really are looking for as much. And then the next session, you'll see we're actually asking for help because we're struggling a little with this last community. So, and I think we're going to be pulled from here in a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I didn't give mine.
Thanks, Enrique.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Record, and I will share my screen.
Okay.
Thanks, Dominic.
No problem. I'm working on it. Tested it before. Can you see?
You can see your email Outlook.
But you don't see the screen?
The slides. No.
No, we see your we see Outlook.
Okay, my apologies.
Well, while you're getting that going, Dominic, maybe I'll give a quick intro. So in addition to some of the data points that we mentioned, one of the things that was really unique in Oak Forest was that they were looking for strategies in their regulatory environment to both encourage some of their existing property owners to put money into their properties, but also their building and zoning codes and how those might be deterrents to attracting new investments. So it's very much a kind of an economic development slash housing set of policies they were looking for. That's not all they were looking for, but it was unique relative to some of the projects that they serve, or the projects that we've done. And I see our slides are up now, Dominic. Maybe move forward.
Sure.
So we've talked about this already in the main room. There's no reason to repeat all of it. The three things that they were really interested in when they discussed the data were, one, how to attract new multifamily investment that serves their senior population, so folks can in those homes can downsize and bring new homeowners into the community. Two, some of the multifamily issues that I mentioned, both attracting new multifamily to their TOD, but also really just bringing some of their existing multifamily to the quality and caliber that they just wanted to see and saw being built in some of their neighbors to the west. And then finally, we tried to help them focus on affordable housing and how that interplays with both the multifamily and aging in place concerns, particularly for the senior population, many of whom are income constrained. Next slide.
Kyle, and one thing we did not mention for Beach Park and Oak Forest was the COVID-related housing challenges that we saw. So we also looked at data from, I believe it's DePaul. They did a study on renters versus homeowners and who's more likely to face more challenges with the COVID economic downturn. Like many other communities in our region, it was obvious that renters would face more challenges. I believe there was 42% of renters in the township that Oak Forest falls in were in occupations most likely impacted by the pandemic. So I did want to make a note of that.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. And that actually dovetails into one of the recommendations that we made. So I think the plan is to go through these recommendations quickly, but then pick the small group's brain on what they think and what we might have missed and how we might do this next time. It was, I know I've used the word unique a few times. This engagement was unique for us because the city was so interested in investor behavior, both their existing property managers as well as attracting new developers. So we made some recommendations to them. First, we made some recommendations to them for their existing approach to property managers and rental regulation. Not every community has a rental regulation or licensing framework. Oak Forest does. It's combined with their crime-free housing program. And as part of that, they, through their police department, they train all of their property managers once a year to understand the licensing and some of the penalties that they may experience under crime-free. we encouraged them to consider some more affirmative things that they can circulate to their landlords as part of that program. And so initially we were joined by the Preservation Compact, who recommended that they regularly send out information on energy efficiency, as well as other programs available through CIC for multifamily buildings, and made themselves available to be part of this training program once a year, and that they send out emails on it on a regular basis. As Diana mentioned, we were in the middle of COVID when all of this happened, so all of the rental assistance programs that have since been released, we recommended the city email those to their landlords as well. Those mom and pop landlords in particular can be tough to engage, and every little bit helps. The second recommendation that we thought might be of real interest to this group was on building codes. There's some general awareness within the city that their building codes may be restrictive and dissuade investors from being interested in existing properties that they have, particularly two former mobile home park properties and a property within their TOD. But they weren't really sure, they were sure in a general sense, but they weren't really sure specifically what they could do. So we invited the Village of Lombard to come and talk about how they had adjusted their building code to allow fabricated wood products as part of their type 4 construction, as well as think through other things that they had thought about, sprinklers, fire exits, etc. And basically recommended that Oak Forest go through the same process. It was a very interesting discussion, but we're, I think, very interested to hear from others in the committee how they thought through this building code issue. And then finally, we encouraged the city to consider a affordable housing building for seniors, particularly in their TOD area, which at the end of our process, the mayor, during our presentation, told the council that he was supportive of moving forward. So I think the plan is to get your thoughts on some of these. The building code issue was new for us, and I think that we're interested to hear from others who've thought through how these can be an impediment to housing investment, as well as other ways to encourage multifamily property managers to invest in their properties above and beyond code enforcement.
Hey, Kyle, this is Lisa from Landmarks, Illinois. And I'm sorry if I missed this, if you mentioned it, because I came into the room just a bit late. Are you all aware of Cook County's efforts right now to redevelop the Oak Forest campus there? That I think there was an RFP charrette process going on through February into March. Architect Jackie Koo was the person hired to oversee that. I'm just wondering if you know the status of it, because I think the hope was that that was going to maybe be multifamily on that location, and it's such a large site. I just didn't understand if any of this conversation relative to multifamily was being encouraged to maybe go to that location as well as sort of a large opportunity site.
Yeah, we facilitated some connection between Cook County and the city on that. It was a little bit unusual for this engagement because it's on unincorporated land. And so where we were, they were just beginning that process, and we hoped that this would, eventually inform.
Kyle, I can speak to that actually, if you'd like.
Okay.
Planning director for Cook County.
Yeah, thanks, Susan.
Yeah, it's okay. How you doing, Lisa? Good to see you. Basically, yeah, we were going down a path of doing a charrette that has reached a bit of a bump. And so the initial plans that had been pitched by the consultant did include housing as a possible use on that site, given its proximity to the train station and the forest preserves. But the issue had always been, is there market for that, you know, to basically appease the development community. That said, we are looking at a lot of other ways to help finance affordable housing other than our HUD money that we get. But we're looking in Markham, for example, we're going to be issuing a private activity bonds to assist in the construction of a senior living facility there. If that goes well, then that's a good model for us to replicate in other areas in the Southland, particularly Oak Forest, Harvey, and possibly Chicago Heights. And then also, you know, we've been in conversations with IDA because, you know, they provide the majority of the financing for the funding that we invest our projects in. I mean, for the projects that we invest our funding in, to see, you know, if we can identify certain sectors. I heard what you were saying, Carl, about the renters being most impacted, or maybe it was Diana, renters being most impacted by the pandemic. Out to our team to see how many applications we received for the rental assistance program, because I do have a map here that can show where those applications are coming from, but it doesn't, it's by zip code, it doesn't identify municipalities. So we can all kind of guess and say, oh, there's Oak Forest there, it looks like they have good coverage. It does. But I'll get you a count shortly so you can quantify what the need is for that. I think the bigger issue is just providing more units, you know, and making sure that those units are affordable. But like I said, we're going to look at alternative housing funding sources and structures. And then on the side of Oak Forest, you know, I envision, you know, we will end up with some kind of housing there because of, you know, all of the characteristics of the site just kind of lend themselves to that. But I'm not certain if that will be the first thing that goes into the site or if it could be, you know, something else that might go in instead, whether that's like a mix of office park, that kind of thing. So we're looking at all different options right now, but there's nothing, Lisa, to go back to your original question, we have not determined an end use yet for that. We're just
And I didn't realize it was unincorporated, which makes sense.
Yeah, it is.
So,
yeah.
So there's no annexation discussion relative to Oak Forest.
Well, not yet. No, not yet. I mean, I think we want to work collaboratively with the community, come up with a use that everybody feels can be sustained and has market presence, and then figure out if it makes sense to annex it or keep it unincorporated.
Beautiful site.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But that's
with a few historic buildings too.
We know.
This is Colin Dusing with the Will County Land Use Office. I do have a question about the idea of the local building codes being an impediment. And that is, did Oak Forest have a program where they would look at the building code renewal, shall we say, every 5 to 8 years? Because that's what Will County does, and a lot of our municipalities do that too, is just look at the codes on a regular basis. And so the question is, did Oak Forest have such a program?
That's a good question. And I would actually be curious to hear about how the communities in your area are doing it. Oak Forest's code had been amended several times. And I think that they were interested in what they could do to streamline the code. But I think what they were also really interested in is the process internally that it takes to review the code collaboratively and between the departments, because you often have departments pulling in different directions. With community or economic development, wanting to meet housing or other economic development goals, fire being very, very understandably, concerned about public safety, etc. And what we talked about in our expert panel, was how to build that collaborative table, and what, if you needed to bring in outside experts to, assure all that public safety was being met. You know, if anything was being met, if anything was being streamlined, how to do that. One thing that worked for Lombard is that they allowed these fabricated wood products, but kept sprinklers, for example, you know, and felt like that was enough risk mitigation while also bringing down the cost of construction. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I think we're curious how this is done in other communities. It was not being done that way in Oak Forest during our expert panel, but if there are, you know, other examples of doing this, you know, in Will County and elsewhere, I think we'd be interested in facilitating that to future interesting.
It's not a formalized program. It's just we look at the International Building Code and all the other major codes, and they're updated every 3 years. So after an update or two, we say, okay, what's the difference? How do we want to upgrade to the new standards, or just keep what we have? And it opens up that dialogue. But it's like I said, it's not a formalized process. It's just something that we do internally, like, hey, it's about time, and then go with it.
This is David Dubois, Director of the Will County Land Use Department. The Will County is actually currently in the process of revisiting the building codes for the county. And one of the things that we do internally is we coordinate with other staff, particularly our community development administrator that deals with CDBG and other programs, to get input regarding potential impediments to see what we can do. Another thing with regard to zoning component of it is that I know that recently, and Colin, you might be able to speak to this a little bit more because you've worked on these, is we've looked at ADUs. I know the county historically has used elder housing or elder cottage housing units. Echo units is typically what they're called. It's more unincorporated areas or the larger lots. But I know that the county also has a modern housing solutions committee that has looked at some potential avenues that maybe we can address some changes within our zoning ordinance. Again, even perhaps more so with ADUs, non-conforming lots and things of that nature to help encourage different opportunities.
If I can chime in, I think we're really interested in examples of cottages and these other missing middle housing types. Not just ADUs, although ADUs are of interest to a lot of communities, but some of the other things you mentioned, we too are kind of interested in those. And if there are any in Will County, we may be interested in profiling those for some other communities.
Yeah, this is Adam. I just wanted to piggyback real quick. AARP is very much in support of ADU as a solution in communities where they make sense. So just to say that, but I also did have a couple of questions real briefly. The zoning issue was kind of touched on, so I don't know there's much more to say on that. But no, I think in addition to building codes, zoning is obviously a huge barrier to multifamily in a lot of places. So that needs to be part of what's looked at. And I wondered if on the aging in place question, if ways to incentivize either financially or just by getting good information out in some places, spreading the word about and when possible, incentivizing financially, giving people resources to make home modifications to make their homes more accessible, if that was discussed as a recommendation, because that seems like a really big fix for the aging in place question specifically.
Absolutely. We glossed over that, but that's been a key recommendation in many communities where we've done work. I think there are a lot of municipalities that have been interested in a handyman program, which is a fairly cost-effective thing that they can manage themselves or interjurisdictionally for small repairs. And there's also home modification dollars available through IDA for nonprofit providers. What we've found, and I think this might be a discussion point, is that throughout the region, the nonprofit infrastructure is very uneven. So in Lake County, for example, Community Partners for Affordable Housing is a intermediary for IDA's home modification program. and we could just bring them to a community in that county, and they can bring boxes of literature, and the recommendation can just be to inform residents of the available funds. But we've worked in other communities where there isn't a provider for these home modification dollars. And in those cases, our recommendation may be to, to find a nonprofit partner and apply. More of an observation than anything. It's important, but it's very uneven in the infrastructure that's out there for some of the communities that we serve.
It is uneven, and I think a big part of why is just there's not enough funding too, right? So I think asking, especially in this climate right now of infrastructure focus, it's important to ask for funding to come to modification programs too. So yeah, I agree though.
I think we've got the 1 minute warning about 20 seconds ago, and now we see it. This is I think it speaks to the topic that we have so much to discuss, and I appreciate that. Christine, did I cut? Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of